Welcome to Keeping It Green, a podcast for ornamental plant professionals and enthusiasts with hosts Margaret Pickoff and Sandy Feather.
Hello, and welcome to Keeping It Green, a podcast from Penn State Extension for ornamental plant professionals and enthusiasts. I'm one of your hosts, Margaret Pickoff. I'm a horticulture educator with Penn State Extension, and on each episode, I'm joined by my colleagues on the green industry team as co-hosts. On today's episode, my co-host is Sandy Feather. Hello, Sandy.
Hey, Margaret. How are you
Thanks.
today?
I'm doing pretty well. It's nice to be here. I'm glad that you're here with me. On today's episode, we'll be joined by Patricia Prade, one of our new colleagues on the green industry team here at Penn State Extension. Before we get to our interview with Patricia, we'll start out with a quick check-in, and let's see what Sandy's up to. What are you up to? This is the third week of February here that we're recording this. What's going on, Sandy?
Well, it's busy meeting season for most of us, and I just got done speaking at the Western Pennsylvania Turfgrass Conference, and that was nice because I've been involved in this industry in this area for a long time, so it's kind of like old home week, running into a bunch of people that I know. So that was good. Plant-wise, weather-wise, I'm ready for winter to be over.
Yeah.
It's been pretty cold.
Yeah, it's been really cold. I feel like the last couple of winters here in Philly have been really, really mild. And I'm actually, well, at first I was really glad that we are having like a cold winter because it freaks me out when the winter is too warm. But I think every winter I kind of get to a point where it's like, okay, we're starting.
We're good.
This feels like enough. I'm good with the cold weather. Time to move on.
Yep.
And you start getting that kind of gardening like bug starting to yeah, you gotta get out there and do something with plants, which is what we love to do.
Yeah, and
Um,
you don't really get to do that the way the weather's been, that's for sure.
yeah, but
And
it is
and we
a good
really shouldn't be complaining because, Erie County's had over 100 inches of snow this winter.
wow.
So, on the plus side, I mean, that's a good insulator that protects a lot of plants.
Right.
But
Yeah, I mean these winters where we haven't had a lot of snow, really, I mean we had more this winter than the past couple of winters, but
right.
it's really not enough to provide any sort of insulating layer on the soil, at least out here in Philly. And yeah, it just seems to melt within a couple of days. But yeah, we'll see.
I
We'll
think we
see.
were pretty lucky. We did have 10 below one morning, but at the time we had decent snow cover, 5 or 6 inches. I mean,
Oh
it's
wow.
better than nothing.
Yeah, I'll say.
But
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
I
we'll
think
see.
a tricky thing in the last couple of winters, and we'll see what happens as we're kind of approaching spring. It seemed like, we would have kind of a stretch of cold weather and then a couple warm days, kind of premature warm days, and then the temperature would plunge again. And
Hmm.
that's so stressful on these plants that are kind of starting to come out of dormancy,
Right.
or on the other side of the season in the fall, they're not in dormancy yet. And yeah, there's a lot of kind of dormancy confusion out there in the landscape, and
I
it's
think
tough
so.
on these trees, especially like our conifers, our evergreens.
Especially
Um,
broadleafed evergreens, I think.
yeah, yeah,
And I know this winter we'll see how it goes because we did have that 10 below. We had a couple of nights of below zero,
okay,
but in 22 we had a really long, mild fall. And then right before Christmas, it was like sub-zero. And it was
wow,
so nasty, and it lasted a few days. And that following spring, the damage to boxwoods was amazing
wow.
because they weren't fully hardened off. And then I guess it did some damage to the stems that opened them up to particularly volutella.
Oh,
I was,
wow.
yeah, I spent a lot of time on landscapers, customers' properties looking at boxwood in 23, the spring of 23, and I submitted a bunch of samples up to the plant disease clinic, and only one came back for boxwood blight. The rest of it was volutella and
Wow.
winter injury. So
Oof, it's a tough time for boxwoods.
Yeah, there's a lot going on with them.
There's a lot. Yeah, we'll have to do a boxwood episode at some point.
I
Um,
just did a talk for the turf conference on have boxwoods become more of a liability than an asset.
wow.
Fortunately, they're all landscapers, so nobody, dragged me off the stage.
Okay. Yeah, people have strong feelings about boxwoods.
Well, and they do things that you can't really do with other plants, and a big part of it is the deer resistance.
Right.
You can trim yews and stuff into topiaries, but the deer are going to eat them. So,
Yeah. They're gonna mess up your topiary design.
pretty much.
Yeah, they want to make their own topiaries.
They had their own ideas about what that plant
Yes.
should look like.
Well, it's nice to catch up with you, Sandy.
Yeah, it feels like
And
it's been a while.
it has, yeah. I'm really excited to welcome on our guest today, who is one of our newest colleagues at Penn State Extension on the green industry team, Patricia Prade, who's an extension entomologist based in Lehigh and Northampton County. Welcome, Patricia.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And you go by Pachi, and so we're gonna call you Pachi for the rest of the episode. But yeah, thanks for being here. We always kind of start our conversations the same way by asking our guests to describe what they do. And so you are an extension educator like us in the horticulture unit, but you kind of have this special role as an entomologist. So can you describe kind of what you do?
Yes, of course. So I did a lot of research prior to this position on biological control invasive species, and I'm an entomologist, right? I have a PhD in entomology. So most of what I do is related to trying to understand, first of all, what's coming in, right? Like the box tree moth.
Mm.
We're talking about that before it was even a problem here. So then people have more information. Or one that I talk all the time is a Thrips parvispinus, which is a new invasive thrips that is in the state. Things like that. And also try to bring more education and information about using biological control to control pests. So instead of just using chemicals, while we know that chemicals are very important and it's hard not to use them, sometimes you can use biological controls, which are live organisms to control pests. So that's what I've been doing. And I do
Very
have a
cool.
webinar series on invasive species.
Oh yeah. Well, we're gonna
That's right.
definitely talk about that because that's been
Okay.
really successful.
Yeah, it
And
has.
invasive species are definitely a hot topic that a lot of people across the industry are really interested in. So let's like rewind a little bit. I wonder if you could talk about your training and education and research leading up to coming to Penn State. So you're from Brazil. And you have a PhD, so fill in some of the gaps there. What were you studying?
Okay. So in Brazil, I did forestry. I was in Brazil, we have a big paper company, right? So that's what I did. And I entered that thinking, "Ah, I'm going to work for this paper company. It's going to be great." And then I started working with insects and I got very interested. I was like, wow, insects are more interesting than paper, right?
Who would have
Can we say
Right,
that
exactly.
you caught the bug?
Basically, yes, right? 'Cause, different than the history, a lot of people that are entomologists right now, like most of my colleagues, they grew up loving insects, think like making collections. I always thought insects were gross, right?
thought?
So before college, if you would tell me it would be an entomologist in the future, I'd be like, nope, not even a chance. So I
Interesting.
did, yeah, it's very interesting how things change, right? And when I was doing forestry, we had a lot of collaboration with international organizations. So I did my undergrad in forestry in South Brazil, where I'm from. And one of the researchers from the University of Florida invited me to do an internship at the time in a classical biological control facility. So what that means is a classical biocontrol is when people have to go to the area of origin where the pest is coming from. In the case,
Mhm.
the pest was called Brazilian pepper tree, which is an ornamental plant
Mhm.
that became invasive in Florida. It's a huge problem there. And I was, well, I'm gonna go. I want to learn more about entomology. I'll learn more about biocontrol and research. And get this international experience. And from there, then I got invited to do a PhD while I kept studying Brazilian pepper tree, which was very good for me and for them, because then from there, I was the one going to Brazil to do research. I was like, oh, great, I'm going home and work a little bit.
So I take
And
it that's not invasive in Brazil.
no, it's a very important species. It's very common on the coastal regions. So just to bring that to perspective, 1 hectare of forest in Brazil has more than 1,000 different species, right?
Wow.
That's a lot. So a plant like Brazilian pepper tree, which thrives in open areas, would not become a problem there. And also there is
Okay.
a lot of uh, natural enemies, right? The natural agents taking care of it there. So it's not a problem. Um, but in Florida, well, you know Florida, right? There's no, especially Central South Florida, we don't have many high trees, most of it's
Right.
grasses and things like that. So it took over.
Mhm.
Hmm.
So, as far as the biocontrol, so you described classical biocontrol as going to the source and kind of seeing, okay, this plant is native here. What are the kind of controls that are keeping it in check and keeping it from becoming as aggressive as it would in a non-native scenario? So, what did you find? Are there like a collection of certain species of insects that feed on it? Is it like a plant pathogen or something that's keeping it in check? What was the what are those biological actors?
There's all of them. All of them are options. I specifically study insects because those are the ones that I was interested in. That was my research was focusing on. But for example, when you go to a foreign country to try to find a classical biocontrol agent, you're literally looking for that plant anywhere that you can find it and shaking the plant around, see what kind of insect is on it, what you see eating, what is causing any damage, or a pathogen, or things like that. So you go trying to hope for the best, to find something that's going to be effective. That is, I always like to remind everyone that is a lot of regulation. It's not just, someone going to a foreign country bringing insects in. That would be a huge
No,
problem
that would be
because,
bad.
right, we know you can bring invasives in, but when you do research, you have to bring it in. There is a lot of regulations by the USDA and APHIS, PPQ. You have to do all the work in a, I always like to say that it's a maximum security quarantine where air, water, everything's filtered before even getting out. And I remember I had like 4 different doors to get in until be able to get to a lab, just to make sure not taking these insects out. And then, right, all the research that has to be done and the process to get a permit to release. So it's a very extensive work that has to be done. And I work on that part during my PhD at the University of Florida.
Hmm. So you're kind
Nice.
of just, I'm familiar with this a little bit from the plant side of things, as far as like the noxious weeds in Pennsylvania and the process that um, nurseries and growers and propagators have to go through to show that a certain cultivar of an invasive plant is not going to uh, produce seeds, it's not going to reproduce, it's not going to spread aggressively. Um, can you talk about how you test for uh, sort of like the potential dangers of bringing a specific insect into a different country? Are you looking at like, yeah, how it reproduces, how quickly how many generations it produces, like what kills it? What's that like?
So, to be honest, if we could find a good insect that reproduces very fast, ate fast, and ended the invasive species, that would be a goal, but it doesn't work like that. One of the first experiments that we do when we bring an insect in, right, brought a brand new insect to quarantine. It's called host range assessment. So you need to check several different species. Let's say we're working with Brazilian pepper tree during my PhD, right? So I had to test all the important species that were present in Florida, that were related to Brazilian pepper tree, which is an Anacardiaceae, which is in the family of cashew and things like that.
I was just going to say that's the cashew family. Doesn't that include like poison ivy and stuff like that?
Yes, yeah, I had to test all those plants.
Mm.
And it's very interesting. I got allergic to Brazilian pepper tree in the US, not in Brazil. Um, it's a great plant. And then we also have to test against the insects that we're studying against several important economical species like
Mhm.
lettuce, citrus in Florida, especially. Talk about
Right.
Florida, you talk about citrus, right? Sugar cane, things that we know that those specific insects most likely would not survive, would not feed. We had to test.
Mhm.
And I remember I had the hardest time in my life finding this one specific plant from California, which is endangered because
Oh,
Brazilian pepper
jeez.
tree is also a problem in California.
Okay.
So if we release this insect in Florida, most likely eventually that will be also released in California. So we had to test species in California as well. So I remember I tested more than 100 different species. So it's a very
Wow.
extensive or yeah, right? It's a whole PhD worth of it. And and I would do a lot of biology studies. Most of the time these insects are not gonna they might reproduce a little bit faster in the perfect conditions that you can find in Florida. Because when you think about Brazil, you think like it's hot all the time and it's like this beautiful tropical, which it is, but we do have winter. It's different than Florida, especially the part where I'm from, which is slow down the development of these insects, where in Florida that doesn't happen. So
Okay.
we have to
Mhm.
do all these studies in lab. Um, we have to test how cold tolerant they are because while Florida cannot, some parts of Florida are not cold, some parts are. And then
Mhm.
again, we plan to release these insects in different regions of the country because Brazilian pepper tree is a problem in Texas, California, Florida. It's going to Georgia. So right, climate change is making it move its range.
Mhm.
So we had to test a bunch of stuff. But
Wow.
yes, the idea is so we test there's more than 100 different species. If it feeds in some of these very important species, we will not be able to release this insect.
Mhm.
So the studies that are done today, different than what was done 50 years ago, are a lot more restrictive, right? Because you have to wait. Is this going to be a problem? Is this going to be detrimental for agriculture? We're not going to release. We don't want to create a bigger problem.
I'm kind of familiar with that classical biological control from the hemlock woolly adelgid because
Yes.
that's exactly they've determined that there's different genotypes. There's a couple that are native to China and one in Taiwan. There's a couple that are native in Japan. There's actually one that's native to the Western United States. And then they found, some adelgid specialist beetles out west, Laricobius nigrinus,
Yeah.
I think. Anyhow, and but they had to make sure that they were suitable to be released here in the eastern United States. And they also found a very specific predator in Japan in the same area where the hemlock woolly adelgid that's troubling our trees is from. But, they had to go through everything that you're saying, to be able to ensure that these insects weren't going to be damaging to insects that we value.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
one thing that we don't think much, and you start reading more about it, maybe like, oh, yeah, it makes sense, is that some of these plants or insects that are coming in have chemical defenses. So
Mhm.
our insects are not used to eat those chemicals. They're
Right.
most likely gonna die. So they're gonna be away, right? Spotted lanternfly, right, has warning coloration. Other
Right.
birds and insects are like, well, let's
Whoa.
not, yeah,
Those
let's
look
not play
scary.
with that, right? So
Yeah,
that's
I
Right.
wouldn't
why
eat that.
going to the going to the area of origin of these pests, you're looking for insects that have this historically evolved with this problem that's in your area now. So they can survive those chemicals, and that's why that's so important.
Yeah. It's no, and I have to laugh because they're here now. And I wish I had seen who did this because on my property I find lots of spotted lanternfly wings.
Mm.
So something is eating them. I just don't know if it's a bird, if it's a praying mantis. I I
I would
just
think
find,
praying mantises, but I could be wrong. Yeah.
yeah, I just find little body parts laying
Wow.
around. So somebody's
Good.
eaten them.
The
That's what I
camera
said.
there.
I was like, yes. And some
It
of them
kind
I
of
find in spider webs. So I think spiders are maybe
I
doing a little
have
bit
I have
more.
seen spiders chomping down on spotted lanternfly before,
Yeah,
which is
I'm
very
all
cool.
for it.
I wonder, like one tricky thing about, and we'll talk more about invasive species and plants and stuff, as it relates to Pennsylvania. And obviously Hemlock woolly adelgid is a huge problem that we're dealing with now. Um, as far as classical biological control, uh, it often seems like our response to invasive species is like too little, too late. And so I wonder, um, are there big success stories with classical biological control where um, like the problem um, was noticed early enough in the process, and the research was able to happen fast enough that the biological control brought in was able to control that population spread? Or is it kind of just like a tool that is used alongside other tools in the kind of IPM toolbox that kind of weakens plants while so you can kind of go in there with other tools and remove them or prevent their spread? Like, where does it fit in the sort of toolbox of control?
Oh, often we use, especially classical biocontrol, when you're talking about environmental, like environmental sensitive areas or parks, for example. It's a tool, right? Some of these places you also cannot spray chemicals, like the Everglades Park. The Everglades Park in Florida, it's taking over from Brazilian pepper tree and other invasive species. Brazilian pepper trees, I know the best, but um, the idea is to have something that can slow the growth of these plants, because these plants often, or insects, right? They grow a lot faster than our own native species, so they can outcompete them. And a lot of times they have chemicals that kill surrounding plants. There's like all kinds of other things going on at the same time. So often biocontrol, first of all, biocontrol is very expensive. Just thinking about
Mhm.
classical biocontrol, right? Just thinking about you have to have scientists going to different countries. And often you have to do several trips, it's not only one. You're maintaining a maximum security lab, right? It's a lot of work. It's a lot of people involved. So often when people find a new invasive species like SLF, for example, you try to do chemical control right away when you can.
Mhm.
Sometimes, unfortunately, these species they're establishing very slow here and there. You don't see them, and you just see that as a big problem once it's everywhere. And that happens with several other different species. We do have one example in Florida, air potato, which is this vine from Asia. It was a huge problem. And oh, another thing is classical biocontrol work, especially when you talk about plants, can be anywhere between 5 to 10 years. Just
Mhm.
research before you are able to release anything.
Yeah.
One of the insects that end up being released for Brazilian pepper tree, which is actually a trip species, which is like, oh, you're releasing a pest. No, it's a good insect. Uh, my uh, undergrad advisor did his PhD on that. Like it took them 30 years to find a good insect and to be able to release it. So it takes a very long time. That's why people don't use that as the sole idea how to protect something. It's just a tool. But then just going back to Florida, air potato used to be a very big problem. They found this insect, the air potato beetle, that did such a good job eating the fruits and also eating some of the bulbs that this plant produces that mostly the control is being done by the insects themselves, not anything
Uh,
else. But
I
that's
think
like the poster child for biocontrol, right? It's not, it doesn't happen everything everywhere.
I think there's been some success with, and I'm not going to be short, I think a weevil and a beetle in getting after purple loosestrife. It was sold for years as a perennial, herbaceous perennial plant. It's beautiful, but it took over wetland areas like crazy.
Hmm.
And so going up north from Pittsburgh, like up towards Erie, on I-79, there's a place called the Conneaut Swamp, and it used to be bright pink in August with the flowering of this plant, and it's not anymore. And the researchers with DCNR released, I don't know if they used the weevil or just the beetle. There was a couple different insects that they had going after purple loosestrife. And it seems like they've done a good job and other plants are still there. So they didn't kill
Yeah.
everything.
No.
I did want to ask about another kind of stop on your journey to coming to us at Penn State, which was your postdoc at Rutgers, which was also, I think, from what I understand, based in classical biological control and blueberries. Is that right?
Yes. So that was very interesting for me because again, I was doing my PhD inside a lab, right? Doing everything you need to do before you can release an insect. When I started at Rutgers, to work on spotted ring Drosophila, which is a very big pest
Yep.
for soft skinned fruits, not only blueberries, like all the berries, cherries, all kinds of stuff. They had just got a permit to release this insect. It's a parasitoid wasps, which they just changed the name, but it's Ganaspis. It's a fairly effective insect. It's still a lot of work to be done because again, the first releases happened in 2022, if I'm not wrong. That's in Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania. So Kathy Demchak did work with that here in Pennsylvania with Carly. Um, so yes, that was my classical biocontrol experience with what happened after we get permits. And then I was testing because when you're doing experiments in a lab, everything's perfect, right? There's
Right.
no hurricane, there's no wind, there's no anything. Temperature is beautiful, right?
It's not 10 below zero. Yeah.
No, it's just the most beautiful thing in the universe, right?
Mhm.
When you bring that to a real life experience, even though sometimes they do a very good job in the lab, they might not survive outside because of you can only test so many environmental conditions. You cannot just mimic everything that's happening everywhere. So when you bring it outside, there is a lot of studies to be done, especially you want to release to see if they're coming back. And that's why when they start doing these biocontrol programs, people get very excited when they hear about like, oh, please send it to me. No, first releases need to be done in specific points because they need to see if the insect's establishing. Like
Mhm.
I release it here. Next year, I'm going to check 1 kilometer from here, 1 mile from here, 2 miles from here. Is it here? Does it move? Did it survive? Didn't it? Things like that. So you
Is
have
it reproducing? Yeah.
yes, right? Because you need to know what's really happening before you start putting a lot of effort in rearing these insects, getting a bunch of them to release. You cannot just release things because you think it's cool, even though it's cool. it,
Do
Well,
you think
probably there's some native, predators, parasitoids that would go after those introduced species too.
it happens. Yeah, yeah.
mm,
It
is
happens a
the
lot of times.
is the goal in an ideal world for those species to naturalize and kind of develop their own self-sustaining populations? Because I feel like
Yes.
I I work with some like cut flower growers and other growers who use high tunnels and greenhouses, and um, I feel like in those cases, the growers are just releasing these biocontrols kind of on a schedule because they're not really meant to like survive in there for that long. They're just released for a certain period of time, and maybe they reproduce a little bit, but they're not really meant to like survive the winter or last all that long. But in these outdoor like blueberry fields or other outdoor growing environments, um, I would guess that like in an ideal world, your biocontrol is just kind of like reproducing, it's lasting, it's surviving the winter. Does that happen often, or is it something that a grower would need to continue to release over and over again?
So the main idea, and it's always good to talk about that because a lot of people get confused, right? What a classical biocontrol is or a like the ones that you buy at the store, it's called augmentation biocontrol. You're just like releasing a bunch of them for them to take care of your problem right away. They most likely gonna die because there's nothing else for them to eat, or they're gonna fly away because food ended. The idea is that they're gonna bring back an equilibrium to your ecosystem, right? So they are
Mm.
gonna survive and spread it by their own, and they're gonna establish and they're gonna do their job, and you don't have to make releases. Maybe like every so many years you do some releases just to bump up the population, but nothing like you have to every week release for as long as possible, right? Because when you do an biocontrol in a greenhouse, you have to do scheduled releases. There's no way those
Right.
insects can survive because of the conditions you're giving them as well.
That makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah. Great. Well, let's talk about your work at Penn State a little bit. We've gotten some background, and I have not um, done a lot with biocontrol or classical biocontrol in particular. So it's really interesting to learn more about how it works in these different environments. So as an extension educator, I know one thing that you have brought or kind of initiated as part of your programming is this webinar series in invasive species, which has been really successful. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, like what you cover and who you bring in to give those webinars?
Yes, absolutely. I took the idea from so it's called Pennsylvania Invasive Species Webinar Series. We have one webinar every first Friday of the month. It's free, so people can just come in and learn about a different topic. Whatever invasive species, it's not only plants, it's not only insects, it's whatever is invasive. Um, I took the idea from a friend from Florida. She's like, wow, I did this thing in Florida and it works very well. I'm like, well, I'm gonna try. There's a lot of things that I need to learn because I'm new to the region, right? Well, even though I was in New Jersey for 2 years, I lived the majority of time I was in the US, I lived in Florida. So that's my experience. So I'm like, well, I want to learn what's happening in Pennsylvania. And it's been very successful. It seems like people were very thirsty for that kind of information. And we have been getting people from all over the country. Most of the people that participate in the webinars are from Pennsylvania, New York, Maryland, so our surrounding states. And as I mentioned, it's several different topics. For example, in February, the first week of February, we had a scientist from the New York Botanical Garden talking about how climate change influences the spread of invasive species. And another thing that I like to mention, because sometimes people get a little bit confused, is these are very beginner level webinars. The idea is just to bring the basic information for everyone, right? For homeowner, master gardeners, for our educators. Uh, and people have all, even though sometimes you know the topic, there's always something new to learn.
Mm.
Next month, the webinar is going to be about weed identification, invasive weeds and in management. And then the following one's about ticks. So there's always a different topic, always related to invasive species. And the biggest advantage of being a webinar, and I think that's why I decided that would be a best way to go about, is that when you're doing webinars online, you can get speakers from all over the country or the world. So we had people from Canada, and I had a lot of my friends from Florida, from South Carolina, right? People from all over the country. You can get people that are working directly with that issue that can give uh, their information to us, and it's easily accessible.
Mm. Yeah, it
Nice.
definitely seems like a topic that you could. I mean, I'm not suggesting that you just continue this for the entirety of your extension career, but I bet you could like bring in a different
I'm gonna stop,
speaker.
yeah, when I get tired. That's what I say.
Yeah, it is like a great topic to explore. And I give some talks on invasive plant management, and even within the plant world, there's a lot to talk about in Pennsylvania. But when you're talking about insects and like these different species and how everything is kind of interconnected, how climate change is throwing a wrench into things and kind of yeah, how that's going to determine how we control things in the future. Yeah, it's a lot of really good topics. Have you come across a uh an invasive species here in Pennsylvania that you're like really into and you're just like, whoa, this is so cool, or this is so scary, or like what's been like one that you've found kind of interesting since you started?
So the thing I was brought in to do the trips pervispinus Cloudy. So I wanted to see if it was in Pennsylvania. This is an invasive species from Asia. is in Florida since 2020, Canada since 2022. We wanted to see if it was here. That's a problem for greenhouse growers. And even though this pest is not going to survive outside in our winters, it can survive a season outside if it's outside. So I do like that I had a little bit of experience with trips during my PhD. And then here I'm like, oh, this is a new thing. It's very, and it's kind of bad to say that, but it's very exciting, right? To share information about something new.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I was in New Jersey talking to the Jersey vegetable growers about it because a lot of people don't know. And just like a lot of other species, you have a huge array of damage that can look like several different things. Can be abiotic factors, can be diseases, can be all kinds of stuff. So it's always good to, I like that I can bring education about that and then can tell people about it so people are prepared. I think that's why at the moment that's my favorite.
That's cool. Yeah, I just gave a talk for master gardeners for their basic training, volunteer training on weeds and invasive species. And something I always like to share with them is that I think invasive species are really cool. And I think when we think about weeds and plants that we don't want to be in a particular place at a given time, and we use words like aggressive and invasive, and we're waging war on the spotted lanternfly, and we use
Right?
all these but if you think about it, I mean, and again, I'm usually thinking about this in terms of plants and not insects or diseases or things like that. But these are really cool organisms, and learning more about seed dispersal mechanisms and how okay, they spread really easily. How do they do that? Oh, they're spreading vegetatively. They've got this crazy root system that's if you cut it, it sprouts up again. It's like they're
Isn't it
pretty.
Or they're,
crazy? Sometimes
or
you just
they're,
need a section of the roots and you get a whole new plant. You're like, how? And it's
Yeah,
everywhere now.
it's kind of amazing. And I think we are so used to, and granted, there are very good reasons um for being very careful about them, and there are a lot of risks, and sometimes human health risks and economic risks and environmental risks. But it is cool to take a moment to kind of think about these species and like how cool they are, and they're adapted to different environments, and just have these cool, yeah,
Like they're fighters,
ecological,
right?
yeah,
yeah,
Like
that's exactly
surviving.
right. Well,
yeah,
and then there's the ones that secrete allelopathic chemicals, that
yeah.
don't let anything grow in the sphere of its root system,
I know. What a
That's pretty
cool,
amazing.
Yeah,
I'm
like
yeah,
if you
telling
think
you,
ecologically,
I think plants are smarter than we give them credit for.
they totally
that's
are.
true.
Yeah, they totally are. Um, yeah, the thrips issue is tough, I know, because uh it's hard to identify. I mean, we have Western flower thrips that are in lots of greenhouses, and they're really tough to see there because they're tiny. And so we have this other, invasive species of thrips. I know that's been a challenge because it can be hard to tell them apart, and
Yep.
training growers to scout and be able to identify these thrips versus a different type must be challenging. So that seems like a really good challenge for you to tackle.
Yeah, I'm trying my best because it is
Yeah.
hard, right? They're very small. I have very good vision, at least at the moment. So I can see them easily because I train my eyes for that. But some people just can't. And
Yeah,
also, it's a lot of work these people are doing. They cannot just keep looking for one little thing, right?
right. And can you remind us what the next webinar topic is that's coming up in March?
Yeah, so the next webinar is on weed identification.
Okay,
It's going to be with a Penn State Extension educator talking about what are pests more common in vegetable production, but you can find them on your yards as well. So we're going to talk about ID and management.
gotcha. Cool.
Yeah, so that
Are there any other programs that you're working on that you wanna tell us about? Um, I know you're kind of getting your I feel like we all have sort of yearly cycles of programs that develop over time, but anything that you're looking forward to when the weather gets nicer?
Yeah, so I'm working with Ruth Benner and Robin Underwood, the two other entomologists. We're planning to do a entomology 101 program. I email some of our educators this week, just to bring basic entomology education. It's going to be a series of webinars and then one day in person to do more hands-on experience. I'm excited for that. And also we're probably gonna do at the end of the year a biocontrol workshop just to teach people how to make releases and how to see if the insects you're buying are viable.
Very
That's
cool.
what it is for now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I look forward to hearing more about those programs. Um, we're about ready to wrap up this conversation, and we always like to hear from our guests at the end what they like to do when they're not working. So, what do you like to do when you're not on the clock?
I got into gardening and I am so upset that this winter's not going away. Uh, and also, yeah, and I like to play with my son, and he also likes gardening. He's very cute.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
awesome. Do you guys have
yeah.
a vegetable garden in the summertime?
We do. Yeah, he
Nice.
likes to drown the plants. So, yes, with water.
That's a good way of like learning about over irrigation and effect
Yes,
on plant pathogens at the root zone. So he's obviously putting some of those things into practice early.
exactly. Yep.
Yeah,
He's learning on the
we'll recruit
job.
him in no time.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Pachi, thank you so much for talking to us. I've learned a lot, both about your work and just in general about biocontrol and invasive species. And we're so excited that you've joined our team and can't wait to
Absolutely.
continue to work with you.
Thank you. Very excited to be in this team. Everyone's amazing. It's a great
Oh,
place to work. Thank you.
great. Well, thanks so much, and we'll see you next time. All
See
right.
you.
Take care.